Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Ethereum, dubious speculation. I'm actually out of town right now, so I wasn't actually planning on making this video, but here we are. The markets are finally starting to do what we've talked about for quite a while, so I did just want to make a video. With Ethereum, in the short term, it is pulled back to this trend line here. So you can see we've been back at that trend line several times. But what I like to look at with ETH is the log scale. So take a look at the log scale. And if you do that, we've seen this pattern play out many, many times. And essentially what it is this wedge develops. And what ends up happening in the wedge is that ETH Bitcoin eventually breaks down. So this is ETH USD, but in these charts, ETH Bitcoin breaks down sort of near the highs. Okay, if you were to look at the ETH Bitcoin chart, you can see that right here it broke down in 2019, it broke down right there. And in 2016, it started to break down around here. This time, it started to break down around here. And the reason I point that out is because when ETH Bitcoin breaks down, normally the altcoin market then drops approximately 70%. This is something we talked about a long time ago. Not only that, but a lot of times ETH USD then drops about 70%, right? So last cycle it ended up dropping about 70%. Or sorry, 2 cycles ago it dropped 70% after ETH Bitcoin broke down. And then last cycle it dropped about 66%, excluding the pandemic. So you could have argued that that's what a soft landing would have looked like. And then we ended up getting a hard landing and it ended up dropping about 74%. Now, when you look at it this time, you see something very similar, right? You have this wedge that's formed. And do you see how last cycle, if we were to overlay interest rates onto this chart, you can see that ETH USD fell back into the wedge around the same time that the Fed cut rates. Okay, now again, ETH USD is falling back into the wedge, and my guess is the Fed's about to cut rates. It's possible they wait until September to cut. I would also be open minded to a rate cut in August, given how the market is unwinding as quickly as it is. Now, again, they don't have to cut in August. They could just say, you guys need to deal with the pain for a little while so we can get inflation under control. But this is a very similar move, right? ETH USD drops back down into the wedge. And when that happens, the Fed cuts rates. Now, I've had to listen all year to people tell me that the Fed's not looking at the altcoin market. I agree with you, right? I know they're not. That was never the argument. But the altcoin market is looking at the Fed, okay? So this is actually playing out in a very similar manner as what happened in 2019. Now, for ETH USD, what's interesting, we talked about it, if it could get a pretty large drop because ETH Bitcoin broke down, it's already dropped 50 something percent, right? So, is it going to make it that 70% move? It's possible, right? It's possible. Is it worthwhile to hedge? Absolutely, right? So this is something that we talked about though. And by the way, if it does play out like last cycle, then it could still bounce around in this area before finding some type of decision. There's sort of like this indecision time which comes when it's like, all right, well, is the Fed going to do enough? Back in 2019, when they only cut 25 basis points, it wasn't enough, and Ethereum continued to go down. And then they cut again, and Ethereum continued to go down, right? And then ETH USD bottomed on the last rate cut, right? So that is what we've been talking about for a long time, right? A really long time. And it's interesting now that it's finally starting to play out. And when you look at the altcoin market, I just said, I think in the video yesterday, at least on that or ITC Premium. By the way, we are having the sale on ITC Premium right now. Make sure you subscribe, check it out. And I'm out of town for a little while, so I'm gonna prioritize that. I can't just make videos like this all the time when I'm out of town. But this is the same thing that happened to altcoins. You can see that in 2019 they put in this low and then a high. Same thing right here, right? A low and then a high, and then they bled back down back to this low, and then they ended up holding it for a few weeks. So there's a good chance you're going to see something like that happen again with the altcoin market, where it bleeds back down, to like 440, 450 billion, tries to hold it, and tries to figure out if the Fed has engineered a soft landing or if in fact it is a hard landing. With Bitcoin, you could argue that the 2019 comparison has played out, right? I mean, we've gotten the next lower low. If it were to continue to play out, then you could get you could see it hang around these lows for a while, and then you figure out if it's a soft landing or a hard landing. So last cycle we got a hard landing. Okay, it should be on your radar. And I've had to deal all year with people telling me that certain things can't happen, but just remember markets can do anything, and it's important to consider all of these possible outcomes. So and one of the things that I've talked about a little bit before, if you were to look at the Bitcoin ROI, right? So let's just pull this up for a second. The ROI from the peak, and you go out peak to peak, even with this drop, Bitcoin is still ahead of where it was in the last two cycles, right? It really is. So I've talked a lot about ETH Bitcoin going to 0.03 to 0.04. Guess what? It just went to 0.04008, right? So this stuff is actually playing out almost identically to how it's played out the last couple of cycles. And I just want to say thank you if you followed along, and have and have sort of seen this stuff, and you didn't just criticize it because it didn't fit with the bias that most market participants have. So I do think that Bitcoin dominance is likely going to top sometime in the next few months. I mean, it could top as early as next month at this rate, but I think 60% is where it's going, and I think the altcoin market could still very well underperform Bitcoin. Even in this, like you can see that Bitcoin's down 11%, but the altcoin market is down more, and that goes back to the saying we've been saying forever, that Bitcoin dominance goes up no matter the direction of Bitcoin USD. So in the short term, ETH has made it back down to this trend line, right? Okay. Um, we will see how it plays out here. You could get something where it sort of just bounces around and then slowly makes its way down to the trend line again. I could see something like that happening, but again, there is still the hard landing scenario where it goes down more than that. Okay. And if you look at it like on a log scale, you can see that this wick is just below this wedge that is formed, right? And as I said, last cycle, if we go over here and connect these dots, last cycle, ETH USD fell back into that wedge after ETH Bitcoin broke down, and we're seeing the same thing play out again. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and again, check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Link is in the description below. I am gonna prioritize posting there. I'm gonna be out of town a lot here over the next few days, so we're just not gonna have as many videos. But anyways, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.